Hello, this is a little short story today, just about a little sheep that he was out in the pasture with all the other sheep, and he got to just playing around, running, doing this and that, and as the day wore on, the little sheep had got separated because the rest of the sheep had went way, way, way back in the pasture. I mean, this was huge pasture, and they found them a place to stay in the woods, and they were slowly, gently heading that way, and the little sheep was just all caught up in what he was doing, and he was just having a great, good old time running around doing this and that, not paying attention. And so, anyway, the night time began to come upon him, and he was like, "Oh no, what I do?" He didn't know where he was. He didn't know where by went. He hadn't been paying attention. So anyway, the only thing he seen was some woods nearby. He thought, well, they must have went over there because they left so quickly. So anyway, he took off and he headed over into the woods. And as he got into the woods, it started getting really, the darkness started to come. And then all of a sudden he heard like, hoo, hoo, out in the woods, and then as he went on out there, he was kind of scared because he hadn't been in the woods by himself before. He always had his family around him. So anyway, he went on in there and he was walking around, wandering around. He found him a little place behind some trees. He thought that'd be a great place to be because I'll be safe until in the morning and they come down here to eat and I'll get back with them. And then so, but anyway, in the middle of the night, he heard, oh, 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 like he heard the coyotes starting to cry out and say, wow, the coyotes were in the woods also. And then he also heard some deers, that he had heard. They were clambering their antlers together, click, 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 click. So the woods were really alive that night, So he kept moving on further and further into the woods because he was trying to get away from those sounds of those coyotes. Oh, woo, woo, woo. So he headed kind of the opposite direction, and he walked and he walked and he walked, and then finally he could hear like some crickets making some noise, and then he heard some frogs going rip, 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 rip. So he knew he was close to a pond somewhere, so he thought, well, I'll get close to the pond and I'll spend the night there. So he went down close to the pond and he laid down there to go to sleep. But then about the middle, about 2 o'clock, 3 in the morning, he heard "Meow," and the bobcats had came out of the woods, and they were coming down there to get him a drink early in the morning. I mean, it wasn't morning yet, but they were fighting with something, and it was with each other, but he didn't know what it was, and he was very scared. So this little sheep was scared, and there were so many things that had changed about his life. All of a sudden, he went from being very happy and content around his mom and all the other sheep and lambs and all that kind of stuff, and but all of a sudden he found himself out there by himself with no protection. He had nothing to eat out there, and it was very scary. And there were so many other animals at night that roamed around that he didn't know much about, and he was just kind of trembling in his situation. And he laid down there and he reached over and got him like with his nose and pushed something over there to lay his head on when he laid down. And because he lays on his four legs, but he wanted to rest his chin there. So when he did, well, he grabbed him a snake. He didn't know what he had there, but he just pulled it over there and put his chin on there. Well, then this snake started to, you know, wiggle and move, and it was dark, and the little sheep couldn't see anything. He thought, "What in the world was that?" I felt something move on my neck, and this snake was just kind of wrapping around him and stuff like that. And he was very, very uncomfortable. So finally, he pulled that thing out from under him and decided I'd just put my chin on the ground. So anyway, he did. He put his chin on the ground, and so he laid there, and then early in the morning, about 5 or 6 o'clock, the sun started breaking out. He'd made it all night, but he was awake all night. It was just noisy, scary, and then he could hear something walking in the woods, crunch, 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 and making lots of noise as it come up to where he was laying. And he looked up and he saw the shepherd of the sheep standing there. And he had his long staff with him with his little hook on it, and he had a little bucket with grain in there and corn. And he reached down and put his corn down there, and the little sheep started eating the corn, and the good shepherd started rubbing his head, saying, "Where you been? I've been looking for you all night." And the little sheep was so happy because he knew the shepherd was going to take him back to a safe place. But he wondered. He thought to himself, he said, "How did he find me out here in these woods?" Well, little did he know, when the sun came out, there wasn't no brush hardly there at all, and he was just laying in between the wide open spaces right there. But he thought, I mean, there was a few bushes, but very few. But the moral of the story is basically that, the good shepherd was looking after him after all. Even though he spent a night in darkness and everything, he had great joy that morning because it just got so much better. And that next day, he just loved on his mama. He loved on the shepherd. I mean, he rubbed himself on his leg, just trying to show him, "Hey, thanks, man, for getting me out of that mess." And then the mom was all happy, and all them sheep were just elated that, their little lost sheep has been brought back to them. And so this story is just sometimes we do that. We wander away from the flock and we get caught up in our own things, and we wind up in places that are kind of dark for us. But God seems to know where we hide, and he comes and finds us, and that's a good thing. When he talks to us and tells us to, we're on the wrong path, and he leads us back to a better place, then that's a good thing. So anyway, that's just my little story. Thank you.